People often joke that it is easier to get into the UK illegally via small boat than it is to travel to another European country from the UK legally. And to some extent, they've got a point, because this afternoon the Home Office posted this out. Heading to Europe, from October, British travellers may need to scan their passports, provide fingerprints, and have their photo taken when entering or leaving Schengen countries. And to make matters even more difficult, on the first day for Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary, there were over 1,000 illegal migrants crossing the Channel on the 6th of September alone, after a flurry of days with no crossings due to bad weather. All of whom doubtless will use the legislation and the legal system to full effect to remain in the UK and make appeal after appeal. Regardless of committing crimes, regardless of their right to be here, they will appeal and try to stay in the country. Now, many of you may or may not be aware of Schengen countries. It incorporates 29 European countries and 25 of those from the EU and 4 non-EU members, so you'd be forgiven for not knowing exactly where they are. But you really do need to stay on top of the rules and visas and travels and all of that sort of stuff, so you can get in and out legally without causing yourself any issue. But the key here is that they're going to have to scan not just passports, but fingerprints, photos, and everything else. Now, this obviously is going to link somehow in with digital ID, which I'm going to come back to later in the video, because that is a rather alarming tale to tell as well. But this whole issue about migration and illegal migration is now in the hands of Shabana Mahmood, who has frequently aired her views on preventing the deportation of foreign criminals. And as it was reported just last month, when Shabana Mahmood was still Justice Secretary, she elected not to be represented at the parole hearing in May 2025 to decide the release of Mohammed Shahjaran, a convicted terrorist. And all that she had to say about that, or rather a spokesperson on her behalf had to say, was that this decision was made by the Independent Parole Board, and a view opposing the release was entered by the Lord Chancellor in September 2024. And after thorough consideration of the Parole Board's decision, it was concluded that there was no legal basis to ask for reconsideration. So GB News says, so what? She gave up, and so that this terrorist has now been released. So that might cause you cause for concern. However, there is some light, perhaps, that suggests that she might actually tackle this issue and move forward and do something about it. And as I've said previously, she would have my full support if she takes tangible actions which actually stop the boats and return illegal migrants, deport foreign criminals, and protect the interests of British citizens, whilst, of course, maintaining our humanitarian aspect for those who genuinely and really do need our protection. As against those that are here as pure economic migrants who didn't need to leave France and so on. Now, there's all sorts of arguments as to whether they should leave France or not. Those are political arguments, and I see both points of view. But here's what she says now. She's now suggesting, according to this report in Sky News, she says that the UK could suspend visas for countries that don't do return deals. It says, Shabana Mahmood has suggested that the UK will suspend visas for countries that don't agree to return deals with the UK. She's meeting today with counterparts from the US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, in London, known as the Five Eyes Alliance. Asked about the possibility of visa cuts, she said, for countries that do not play ball, we've been talking about how we can take a much more coordinated action between the Five Eyes countries. For us, that means including possibly the cutting of visas in the future, just to say, you know, we do expect countries to play ball and play by the rules. And if one of your citizens has no right to be in our country, you do need to take them back. Now, that obviously begs the question as to how do they prove that they are a citizen of whichever country they want to send them back to, but at least that sounds like it's a step in the right direction. She says, I'm very clear that there has to be a strong approach for maintaining our border. And that does mean saying to countries who do not take their citizens back that we're simply not going to allow our laws to remain unenforced. They do have to play ball. They have to come to the table. Cutting visas is one of the ways to do that. But that still begs the question, how will they actually determine which country they are a citizen of? And being the lawyer here, because lawyers will jump all over this, being the lawyer, lawyers will jump all over it and say, well, actually, they have ECHR rights. And so they can make all of these same arguments that many people have made before: right to privacy, right to life, right to the freedom of torture, and all of this sort of thing. So they will make all those arguments. They will fight and protest legally. And whilst that is outstanding, there's the argument that they can't be deported, and judges might overrule it and say, well, you can't deport them because this is still outstanding. And even if it gets to a tribunal, remember, we only hear about many of them when they go to the upper tribunal, because they are there being challenged by the Home Office to say, no, we really do want to deport this guy. And then it's challenged to the upper tribunal, which then may only send it back down to the first tier tribunal. And round we go on this legal merry-go-round, because they do these appeals under ECHR. And that is why, fundamentally, I think that has to change.
Now, just as a reminder, in case you missed it, this government continuously seems to be looking for ideas and excuses as to how to introduce digital ID. The last Labour government tried it, and then it was shut down by Conservatives, and this government seems to be trying it again. And this is terrifying for everybody. It's all a matter of control, because who controls the data controls the person. And there are lots of companies that have lots of information on you, but they really should be working on a data minimization principle. And this might even go against the Article 8 rights, the right to a private family life. So I personally think this has significant consequences. But if you take digital ID seriously, and you take your personal identity seriously, I strongly urge you to do what you can to erase yourself from companies who you don't want to have your information stored on their databases and on their servers and so on. And so that is where I introduce a partner with my channel called Incogni, who specializes in helping you to be erased and forgotten from the internet. The right to be forgotten, if you will. It's not just an automated service, it is also a customized and targeted service. You can tell them from whom you wish to remove your information, which websites you want to remove your information. Some of them are stubborn about it, but Incogni will persist and they will get it removed for you. It is a fantastic done-for-you service, and you can use multiple email addresses and they'll help to remove your information from the internet. If they can't find you, they can't harm you. And of course, as a partner to my channel here, I get you a great discount using the code BlackBelt at the link on screen and in the description below. That will get you 60% off, 60% off the annual plan, and you can see it in action. You've got access to a dashboard. You'll see the companies removing your information from their websites, their services, and their databases, and it will be staggering how much information you see removed. So don't forget the code BlackBelt at the link in the description. Grab yourself the discount and start to erase yourself from the internet.
Now, I do agree with what Shabana Mahmood said when she was still Justice Secretary, that the UK has a rather extreme approach to ECHR, in that these illegal migrants and foreign criminals are using ECHR as a means to stay in the UK and to stave off deportation. But how is that actually going to work in practice? Now, Yvette Cooper, when she was still Home Secretary, said that she planned to limit the judicial use of ECHR Articles 3 and 8. I don't see how they can limit the use of laws that are still in place, but that's what she proposed to do, whereas Shabana Mahmood proposes reforms to ECHR within UK law without leaving the convention entirely, which leaves the rights intact and may expand them beyond their original plans, but in somehow doing so still allow us to enforce our borders despite ECHR still being part of our legislation. However, many people now support the notion of leaving ECHR altogether, including Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, who says leaving ECHR is likely. Nigel Farage says he would pull the UK out of the ECHR if Reform wins the next election. And as a reminder, as I'm sure we'll get daily, weekly, monthly reminders as to why we do need to reconsider this, is that on the 6th of September, Shabana Mahmood's full first day as Home Secretary, over 1,000 illegal migrants crossed the shores to land in the UK. Now, speaking of posting things online and personal security and privacy and the right to a private family life, which is under ECHR as we currently know it, now, these rights aren't just going to disappear if we get rid of ECHR. We had lots of these rights already. For example, some people saying, you know, would you like to give up the right to life because we get rid of ECHR? That is obviously a preposterous statement to make, because we don't give up the right to life just because we give up ECHR and leave the convention. However, there are many proponents to digital ID, which is going to have an impact on the right to privacy, which I'm going to discuss again here. Because against all of what I've said about illegal migration and whether or not Shabana Mahmood is really going to take tangible steps, such as those that she's proposed revoking or suspending visas for countries that don't have an agreement with us to take citizens back and so on, this may all come at a cost because she is very much in favour of digital ID. Have a listen to what she says here. This is posted here by Big Brother Watch. Listen to this.
My long-term personal political view has always been in favour of ID cards. In fact, I supported the last Labour government's introduction of ID cards. The first bill I spoke on in Parliament was the ID cards bill, which the then Conservative Lib Dem coalition scrapped. So I have a long-standing position, which anybody who's familiar with my
because it wasn't in the manifesto, was that a mistake?
Well, I have a long-standing position of my own, which those who are familiar with my political track record will know that is something that I've always supported. And look, my other colleagues in government have started this conversation about how we might roll out more digital ID. As Home Secretary, I'm very clear we do have to deal with the pull factors that are making the UK a destination of choice for those that are on the move around the world. And I want to make sure that we can clamp down on that. I think that a system of digital ID can also help with illegal working.
And so the point there is she's a proponent of digital ID, full stop. And this, I may suggest, is quite possibly just an excuse to bring it in the guise, if you like, of stopping illegal migration. To say that if they need digital ID in order to work, in other words, you will need digital ID in order to work, and everybody will need digital ID in order to work, to bank, to shop, to move, to travel, everything else. If that is the case, and I've seen it work in China, I've seen how it works in China, and I don't think that is the sort of thing we want in the UK, because I don't think that it accords with the general wishes and the protection of freedoms that we have in the UK. I do not think the vast majority of people will support this. But with no desire to be uncharitable, this seems to me just a very convenient way to do one thing that the public will support, i.e. stamp down on illegal migration, because it is without doubt a politically hot topic that a lot of voters will get behind, and use digital ID as a means to achieve it on the surface. And so they will try to get you to agree with digital ID in order to go along with the plans to curb migration. Now, I don't believe digital ID is necessary to that end. I do believe it is necessary to get firm with the countries that don't agree the returns policies, and that this should begin with France. But it shouldn't be limited to citizenship, because if they are not citizens of France and they were in France illegally but left France to come to the UK illegally, they should be going back to France, because otherwise, how are we to prove where they really came from? Digital ID is not going to solve that problem, because digital ID is not going to tell you where they came from. It's not going to assist in sending them back to France or to any other country of origin. But it is going to be a means that they can use to then control you. And that, in my view, is quite likely, unironically, if you like, a breach of ECHR right to privacy under Article 8. That has significant problems, and it will be a case of when, not if, data is leaked and breached and hacked and shared and sold and so on. Because once they have everything about you, and this includes not just who you are, but where you shop, where you bank, what you spend, when you move, how you move, etc. If you think of everything you do, everything you say, everything you buy, and everywhere you go, it will be tracked with this digital ID. And they are slowly rolling it out with different mechanisms for company directors. They force you to have a biometric ID. And before long, they will roll it out to all sorts of other things. And the important point here is, reportedly, the vast majority of Labour members, and certainly Labour MPs, support digital ID and are likely to vote it through. So at least for the next few years, we are going to have this digital ID. So a question that I would put out really to the likes of Reform perhaps are, what if by the time the next election comes around, if Reform are voted into government and we have digital ID by then, are they going to scrap it to protect our right to privacy and to curb our concerns that data will be leaked and hacked? Or is the cat out of the bag then? Or is it going to be a case that the data is so valuable that it can be sold on to other parties by then? All of these questions flow up. And once these things are implemented and in place, I think it is very unlikely that they get undone. That is the real concern that I have. Let me know your thoughts and your concerns in the box below. And for the naysayers and the trolls and the commenters that say this is all politics and nothing to do with law, it is very much everything to do with law, because this will be brought about by legislation. They will legislate and mandate a statutory requirement for you to register for digital ID if you want to do X, Y, Z. That will include banking, shopping, traveling, everything. You heard it from me. Watch when it happens. I will say I told you so. And this can only be really prevented by having a government that doesn't implement it. So who knows, really, because they are in power for the foreseeable unless we have a general election, vote of no confidence, which results in a general election, or a major shift in the Labour Party, which at the moment is a supermajority. Let me know what you think. I am somewhat terrified for all of you watching. Let me know what you think. Please do subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.